The following show is brought to you in part by support from Robbins, Kaplan, Miller, and Cerisi. We don't just practice law, we make history. Online at rkmc.com.
Hello and welcome. Tonight I'm talking with Senator Amy Klobuchar, the first Minnesota woman elected to the U.S. Senate, a rising star as described by the Washington Post, and one of the funniest new members in Congress. As many of you know her, she was the Hennepin County attorney for 8 years prior to being elected senator, and I'm just delighted she could join us today for a talk about leadership and about your life. And I'd like to start out, Amy, and ask you how your expectations that you had about being a senator jive with the reality.
Well, Mary, first of all, it's great to be on your show again. I remember being on when I was county attorney, and I think everyone sees it through the years that lives in Minnesota. So thank you for doing this and having people on. In terms of my expectations, I have to say that I didn't really expect what I got into in terms of how much time I'd spend with the other senators. You know, I was used to running an organization, the county attorney's office. We had nearly 400 employees. And then I get to Washington, and the 100 of us are together a lot. And we talk on the phone all the time. When you call a senator, they almost always call you back within an hour or so. And so that was kind of a pleasant surprise, but something I didn't really expect. The other thing is that a lot of the senators are in a little different circumstance than I am. I'm one of the younger senators. I still remember the day my family and I drove up in our Saturn with our college dishes in the back seat and the shower curtain from 1985. And I went to my first fancy lunch in the Senate, and they had, you know, you're in the Lyndon Baines Johnson room, and they have this big picture of President Johnson on the wall, and they've got, you know, this nice little table of food, and I went over and I got a salad and a cup of soup, and I brought it back, and I'm ready to dive in. I've got all the senators around me, and Patty Murray, the senator from Washington State, ran around, grabbed my arm. She said, "Amy, you just took the entire bowl of Thousand Island dressing and you're about to eat it." And I said, "That's what we do in Minnesota. We eat the Thousand Island dressing." But you know, it was just a different environment to be in. But at the same time, I really went there because I'd seen how you can change government and get things done. And there's still a lot of work to be done in Washington, there's no doubt. But I still have hope. I think things that would surprise people about it is that the senators across party lines, a lot of us get along quite well. I have dinner with Lindsey Graham literally probably once every 2-3 weeks, and who's a prominent Republican, friend of John McCain's, and have also gotten to know a lot of the other Republicans. And that's helped me not only to have a better life there, but also to get things done. And I think that's our number one goal. So I didn't expect the economic times we'd be in. I don't think anyone did, in terms of the crisis that the cliff we went over because of Wall Street and some other things. So there's been some frustration for everyone, citizens and myself, that you haven't been able to move as quickly on some things that you want to get done. And I think time is coming now that we have to start pushing on reducing the debt and moving forward with more business-focused things with exports and other things to bring new jobs in. But for the last year or two, we've really been dealing with the crisis of the Wall Street and what happened there.
It's really been crisis after crisis, hasn't it?
However, it's really, the long-term planning is really important here for the country as we look at these other countries like China and India graduating more and more engineers, producing things we never thought they'd produce, and now we're in a competition with them. And I believe we can do this, but we're going to have to do what Minnesota native Tom Friedman calls nation building in our own nation. So we really focus on making things again in this country and thinking and inventing and sending them to the world instead of just being the one that people send things to us. And that's how we're going to grow jobs in this country. So I'm really excited about working on those things. But again, you never know what's going to happen day to day in this job.
Crisis might, intervene.
But that was the same as county attorney as well. We just had different kinds of issues day to day.
Right, you were putting out fires all the time
That's
there
right.
too.
That's right.
What about your growing up, daughter of Jim Klobuchar, beloved Minnesotan, and your mother Rose, who taught school till she was 70 years old? What about your heritage has helped you, and has anything made it harder?
Well, both my parents loved their jobs, and that was an inspiration. My mom, I still have kids come up to me that had my mom in kindergarten when she taught kindergarten or second grade. They always remember when she'd put on this monarch butterfly suit and put up a sign to Mexico or bust to teach them about metamorphosis and things like that. And so she was a great teacher. And the way she worked with kids, and it was just really inspirational. And then my dad, of course, newspaper man, and he would always really, when you look back at his writings, he had a lot of fun and a lot of adventures, but he'd really take on causes. When someone, especially individuals, would get hurt by whatever it is, a bank fee or someone not treating them fairly, and sometimes he'd do it with some fun, but he would really take on their causes, people with disabilities, other things like that. And I think that really steered me some toward public service because I could see that he actually could change things and get things done for people.
An individual can make a difference.
That's right.
Several of my leaders have talked about that important kind of motivating factor to stepping into a leadership role.
Exactly. And then you go way back to my dad, grew up on the Iron Range. My grandpa was a miner. He worked 15 feet underground in the mines in Ely, never graduated from high school, but saved money in a coffee can to send my dad and his brother to school, to college. And, that kind of, when you have that in your family and it's ingrained in you, that you can get things and pursue things that might seem hard. I don't think my grandpa ever imagined that his granddaughter would be a United States Senator, but it makes you, when you get to places like Washington where there's a lot of cynical people, a lot of people that got their heads buried in the sand that aren't really listening to what's going on or trying to fix things, it makes you believe you can fix them, because you've seen this in your own life. You see, your grandpa working that hard every day just to get ahead so my dad could go to school, and that makes you, I think, view things in a different way and look at solving problems in a different way.
You had to really work hard too in college. You went to Yale, you went to University of Chicago Law School, and the work ethic must have,
I think I'm the only one at Yale that took my pink polyester prom dress with me in case I needed it from high school prom. So I did again. I've always had a little bit of a feeling of being an outsider when I got to some of these places and took the Greyhound bus back and forth to Minnesota. But it was, again, I learned a lot there, made a lot of friends, and just like anyone does in college, it was really a big part of my learning experience. And I wrote a book on the politics behind the building of the Metrodome,
which
was
your thesis.
That was my thesis in college, and just a lot of things like that. But I always knew I wanted to come back to Minnesota.
What about your workload now makes it doable? I heard today you were learning and being informed about Asian carp. You're working with the university on nanometers.
Right.
You are working with the Federal Reserve Bank, et cetera, et cetera. How do you keep, and of course we know you have AIDS, but how do you personally absorb, memorize, keep all the facts straight?
I'd really say a few things. First of all, we do have a great staff, and if anyone questioned that, you look at the 8 months when I was the only senator for Minnesota, and we really only had one staff during the middle of the economic crisis, and they rose to the occasion. We weren't allowed to hire anymore, and so Minnesota really only had one senator instead of two, and I was just so proud of our staff that they were able to keep up. We had double the cases in terms of veterans, veterans not getting their benefits, people who need passports, people who are having trouble adopting kids, all these kinds of things, and they really kept up with that. So they're great. And then I think the second thing is I've always liked to juggle a lot of things. I think that comes with being a mom. You know, you've got to, you know, make a peanut butter sandwich and then go and figure out how the foreign intelligence bill is going to work. So I think that's always been a part of my life. And then finally, I think it's easier if you just decide, I'm going to focus on what's right for my state. And sometimes there's issues that will be just completely national in scope, but for the most part, somehow these issues are going to affect your state, and they, you know, may not be in the same sync of where, say, the president is or where your party is. But if you just look at it by what affects your state, it makes it all a lot easier. So, you know, we have, say, the medical device industry really important in Minnesota. A tax was proposed a while back that was out of sync with what they should and could absorb, and so we were able to reduce that by $20 billion. And I think it really saved a lot of jobs, but more importantly for our country, allows this industry, which is one of our fastest growing industries in the entire nation, to export more, bring in more jobs. And that's an example where I had some disagreements with the White House, but you know, when you focus on what is best for your state, that makes a difference. The 35W bridge, this is a little known fact. Senator Coleman was in then, and he and I worked on this together, but all the senators were making these flowery speeches about this bridge bill that had come up, and they were talking about our bridge and how it had fallen down, what a tragedy. Well, they didn't have any money in there for our bridge. And so then I was, you know, had been there, I don't know how long, not year
very
or
long,
so. And I went that next morning and I sat, and I'd called people the night before, and I sat at my desk and I said, I am not leaving till we get this money on there, because I had to get an amendment. And Dick Durbin, who's the #2 guy in the Senate, came and sat next to me, because I'm there and they're just starting the prayer. The chaplain is starting the prayer, and he said, somehow I think you're here to do more than pray. And I go, yeah, I'm not moving until we get this bridge money. So
this is a sit down.
Yeah, exactly. So we eventually got it done. And those are just some examples of where I think if you really focus on what matters, and you have to triage things, you have to decide what your priorities are, it's much easier to not get overwhelmed by all the things that are incoming that come in the door.
That makes sense, and that helps me understand how you do this.
And if you think your people that you're working for is your state, and you look through it that lens, and sometimes you'll have balancing interests within your own state, but it just makes it easier to make the right decision.
When you think about the next years, you're still senator and most likely ongoing as a rising star. What is your
By the way, one congressman told me he'd been there 20 years and was still called a rising star. So there's a lot of older people there that are very well respected, but you can be a rising star there for
a
20
long
years.
time.
Yes. Okay.
You'll still be young.
All right.
What are you most desirous of seeing happen on your watch, however long it is?
Right now, and this will continue, it is this goal of getting the economy moving again, making sure that families are being able to afford to send their kids to college. You know, you think of my grandpa working in that mine. He always had hope that things would be better for my dad, better for me, better for the next generation. And that's what you want for the people of this country. And unfortunately, because of some very bad decisions made by Wall Street, I think some, you know, the lack of really any focus on making sure the American people get heard. You have things like that Bernie Madoff case, $65 million down the tube. Things were happening that weren't good in this country, and now it is steering a big ship to get it back on track so that our economy is chugging along again and people have jobs. And I think that would be the best legacy, to get that moving. And I'm not, you know, I don't think it's going to happen in a month. I don't think it's going to happen in 3 months. The American people know that. But getting us back on track so we're that country again that makes stuff and invents and exports to the world, I think that's a pretty good thing to have accomplished if we can get back. And again, it's going to take a while. It's our universities, it's the way we do our everything from R&D tax credits for research to the way that we make sure that healthcare is affordable. So how are we going to compete against companies in other countries that have more efficient healthcare systems? So it's things like that we're going to have to focus on.
Is the partisanship that we're also very aware of impeding your work in a way that is a daily frustration? How does it affect you, Amy?
personally, as I said, I've done all the bills that I've gotten either as amendments on bills or on their own. I just passed a bill, formaldehyde bill, that the president signed into law, supported by consumer groups, industry, to put some good standards in place so people don't get sick from formaldehyde. The chief author on the Republican side, I was the chief one, but the one that co-sponsored, Mike Crapo, who's a Republican from Idaho. And so I have found if you get to know people and work well with them, you can get things done. Is it frustrating on a day-to-day basis right now this year? Yes, because a lot of things have been slowed down that shouldn't be. I think there's a lot of game playing going on because the election is coming up. People are slowing things down deliberately, and that disturbs me because we have a responsibility to govern despite the partisanship. I'm somewhat positive that after this coming election that it'll get better.
Things will even out a little bit.
It's unfortunate because there's a lot of game playing going on just to get the headline, just to get the next TV news story without really looking at the long-term repercussions for governing, which I think the American people want us to do. They realize we've got this deficit issue and we need to do something about it. They realize we need to push the economy and do things that will produce jobs, not just government jobs, and we needed to do that because we were on a cliff, but the private sector jobs.
I agree. I think the Americans, the citizens are really desirous of that, but it seems that it's getting more divided.
It is, and some of the signs the president's nominees, he put together, some good nominees, and what happens, they were literally at one point 100 of them were delayed for no reason. There's this thing called the secret hold that unfortunately right now the Republicans have been using way too much, and it allows them to put secret holds, and you don't know who's doing it, on people, and then they give it like a baton. They give it to the next one that is a secret hold because they can only do it for a few days. So you never know who has the baton and who's holding something, and then we can't vote on it. So that's a rule that a number of us have spoken out about to try to change. I think there's some procedural changes we can make that are very important, and I think personally there's a lot of civility in how people get along, but it's really making the American people first, just like I make Minnesota first in terms of what's best for the country. And I think we've gotten to that point where we've dropped from first to 12th with graduate degrees. And when you look at the world, we've got some real issues here, and we just can't afford to keep bickering.
And keep wasting time. When you talk with other senators on both sides of the aisle, are they also frustrated, and do they say, very similar things to what you're saying, that we've got to get past this? I mean,
people do, but then they kind of go back to the same games. And so I think there's some, the more this can be brought out in the light, that's why I want to get rid of the secret hold. The more people are embarrassed by their behavior, which is that they're slowing up very important things, whether it's unemployment or whether it's the need to get nominees approved to deal with the oil spill. Those are very important things. And I think the more we shed the light on it, the better it is.
When you look at Minnesota from afar, what do you think we need to be doing in terms of our focus as citizens here? Medical research, environmental issues, education. I mean, we've got a lot of good things to choose from.
We do, and I am so proud of our state. When you look at it, first of all, look at where we've come. We're about 2 points under the unemployment rate for the country. Last we were at like 6.8%. It goes up and down, and we still have some clear issues to deal with. But a lot of why we're doing better than the rest of the country, while we're never doing best for everyone, we have to work on that, is that we have a diverse economy. We've got everything from being 7th in the country for Fortune 500 companies when we're 21st for population. We have the biggest gap in the top states in that way. And we're also 6th for ag. I think the fact that we were ahead of the game on energy, which I'd like to see our country do, we were ahead of the game on energy. So we have biofuels, we've got wind, solar. I think that's been helpful. It's created jobs. We also have done more, as you've noted, with medical research, medical device, Mayo Clinic. We are really ahead of the curve when it comes to efficient healthcare delivery, which is something the rest of the country needs to look at. And as I look at what's made us great, so what is that? We don't want to be another frozen Omaha, is the continuing to focus on that education system of ours, which is, there is federal involvement. We've got to reform leave no child behind, and we've got to make some changes to all kinds of things to make it work better. But that's also a state priority. So I think that's been key to our success, as well as our belief in innovation and having sort of a competitive agenda. Medtronic started as a little company in a garage, and 3M was a 3M was a sandpaper company up in Two Arbors. Target was a dry goods store on Nicollet Mall. Mayo Clinic started with two brothers developing them. So we've always believed that we could move ahead, and I still feel that in our state, and I think that's going to be key. But it's got to be education, innovation, doing things to allow our learning institutions and our companies to keep developing new ideas and then selling them and exporting them to other countries as well.
A lot of people think that the University of Minnesota could become number 3 for research in the world. And that, of course, fits in beautifully with the education.
It does, and
goals.
I actually just got a bill that I worked with them on a Innovation Act. It was called American Innovation Act, on a major bill that's expected to pass, and it went through unanimously through the Commerce Committee. And it basically allows universities to focus more on commercialization, ask them that they really focus on that, because that's what's created jobs in this country in the past, so that their ideas turn into action. Having a loan program, so small and medium-sized businesses, when they get an idea from university, they're able to invest in that and make what was invented, because right now they call it the valley of death, the time between the ideas that's produced from the university and the time it takes to get to market. So making that time easier, working on all kinds of things with the university. So I'm glad that that's headed to the front of the line here, that bill, because when you look at our past, the Bell Labs, things like that, that's where we got a lot of ideas that then produced economic activity.
If we had more time, we could talk about the tax structure and how that affects small businesses and entrepreneurs, but I don't have time to go into that.
The next time I'm on.
Next time you come back,
so small business, 65% of the jobs, and so I'm working very hard to get a bill passed that allows small businesses to depreciate quicker and does all kinds of things with credit, which is what they really need.
Okay, I'd love to talk about that again, or in more depth. Working with President Obama, I know you're not sitting in the same office, of course, but how has that been? Has he pleased you as a leader? Has he disappointed you?
Well, I think that he was given an incredibly hard portfolio, as he once called it. I remember him saying one time, it wasn't his liking that he came in and he had the Wall Street crashing, auto dealers going down, and you add into that the pirates off of Somalia. So he's just
forgot
and
about
those are
that.
just like 3 of about 20 things. And I think I'll take the oil spills, just a recent example. The fact that he was able to push BP to get the $20 billion, that's a good example of leadership. With Exxon Valdez, the fishermen, some of them still haven't gotten paid. So getting that money up front, and obviously there were problems. It's like any president, they should have responded sooner, should have gotten the cap on sooner. But nevertheless, when you saw him stand there and say, we got that $20 billion, that was important. And then said, we're going to reform these agencies that messed up. So I have found him to be a leader that isn't afraid to say, look, some of the people in this agency messed up and we're going to fix this. I think that kind of honesty is important. And he's someone that thinks to the long term, which is what we've been doing with Wall Street reform, healthcare, other things, where you really look at what do we need for the long term, not just what makes the headline tomorrow.
His early goals to really get rid of the partisanship haven't worked, but so many other things have, and yet liberals are still discontented. Do you hear that as you travel around the state?
It's a time of discontent in this country. There's discontent on all sides, and not just with him, just with institutions in general. And I think his steadiness and calmness and the way he approaches things, another example when he had to replace General McChrystal, and that he did it so decisively, putting in General Petraeus, as difficult as that situation is. He is someone that shows that sort of grace under fire, as they say, and is able to continue on with a major focus. So not everyone's going to be happy with everything he does, nor with everything I do, and I don't agree with him on every single issue. But I think people need to look at things in the long haul. And what we've been seeing lately in this country that disturbs me is just this sort of, not even a 24-hour news cycle, it's a tweet away from people. And I think people need to look at things in the long term to see, okay, we could have gone off a financial cliff. Look what happened in Greece and some other places. We were able to pull ourselves back from that. We're now in a steady time, but still not where we need to be. What are the best ways to get to where we need to be as a country? And I think that's our challenge right now.
One of the things that I've sort of observed as I get to sit with leaders is that they have high energy. And I know you do. But how do you balance the needs of being a mom of a 15-year-old, Abigail, wife of John, a busy attorney, obviously busy Congress, Senate woman, senator, and how do you juggle it all, Amy? I think
well,
women
I think first of all,
my
family is just a source of strength for me, and it's a way to sort of put things in perspective. You know, when my favorite was when we were going to vote on some major bill, and I was going in, and the cell phone rang. It was my daughter. She was half in tears. She's at Target with my husband. She has to pick out a swimming suit for the junior high swimming pool party. They can't have a bikini. She says she can have a tankini, and he doesn't understand what a tankini is, which is one of those swimming suits.
Right.
So I go, get him on the phone right now. And I'm explaining to him that she can have this tankini. And then I literally ran smack into Lindsey Graham as he was coming out to vote. I thought, what's wrong with this picture? So I try to balance, but I think the key is that for all moms and dads, it's a balance. And certainly for a lot of people, it's a lot harder than it is for me. People who are single parents, people who can barely make ends meet. So that's what I think. I think it's hard for all Americans. Maybe mine is a little more high profile and sometimes more amusing in that it's high profile. As when I leave here, I have to help my daughter drive in a parking lot. She just turned 15 and got her 30 hours of driver's training. So, you know, there is always a challenge as you go forward with what you have to do. And I think all parents have that.
Challenge and opportunity,
That's right, exactly.
The positive spirit. We are going to give you a couple resource pieces of information. So if you'd like to get a hold of Senator Klobuchar via her website or phone number, take note of these. The phone number first, 888-224-9043. This is toll-free from either here in Minnesota or from anywhere in the country. And the website is klobuchar.senate.gov. And when I went to that, I was surprised at all the things your office does.
Right.
You arrange tours.
Well, actually, and if every Thursday morning when the Senate is in session, so you have to check, that'll, depending on the week, we're mostly in session. We have a breakfast, 8:30 in the morning Thursday. We invite the entire state. If you're really lucky, Mary, you'll come when we have Spam Puffs. We always serve food from Minnesota. And so people should stop by, meet our staff, and I'm always there.
Do people have to sign up for that, I'm sure?
They do. It's helpful if they do, so we know ahead of time, but they don't have to.
But
so.
yeah, check the website out. It's just full of helpful things. Well, thank you so much for coming down. And it's been just great to see you again and pick your brain about leadership. I wish we had more time, but we'll get you back again sometime.
I will promise to do that.
Okay,
thank you so much, Mary.
You. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.